continues to affect our industry more and more every day. In 2016, people watched, read, listened, streamed, and posted more media than ever before. But how can we capitalize on our audience's need to stay more informed and connected? How can we capture our audiences and keep our industry relevant with so many different options for people to consume content? Our VAB Best of the Best team is here with some of the answers. First up, from WWBT NBC 12 in Richmond, Lauren Heilman, and from Summit Media in Richmond, Garrett Dahl are here to discuss the numbers behind it all.
Good morning, everyone. In an effort to stay true to our topic, re-engaging a wandering audience, we decided to do the research a little differently and took it to the streets so you guys wouldn't be on your phones during our presentation. So go ahead and put those away. But before I get to that, we asked people, do you watch local broadcast television? Why or why not? Got a little disclaimer here. This is not an accurate sample size. Specific references to station names and talent have been bleeped out for anonymity and fairness.
Yes, I do watch Channel 2. I like to hear their news. I like the way they present themselves. We watch it, and then in the evening, if we're still awake, we watch again.
Because I like to know what's going on locally.
I watch local TV. I listen to the news typically, and that's the only local television that I would consider myself to watch.
I don't, because I don't have time.
I don't, because TV is dead.
Why do you think TV is dead?
The internet exists. You can get any show instantly.
I don't really like to watch TV. I like to be up and moving and on the go and staying busy and being productive.
And I don't watch TV very often because I'm either usually doing schoolwork or have something else going on.
So I hope you all found that as interesting as we did. Even though we used a very small sample size, it's interesting how it reflected what's actually going on in our industry right now based on just those few people. You'll notice that based on this graph here, if we zoom in a little bit after we look at it at the beginning, so this is traditional TV viewing by age since the beginning of 2011 until the end of 2016. You'll notice if we zoom in, the older demographics have started, anywhere from 40 hours per week of television consumption, and this is broadcast, all the way to 55 hours per week. So they're getting even more loyal with all these new options that we have. Whereas if we go to the other side of the spectrum, you're going to notice we have teenage, 12 to 17, all the way up to adults 25 to 34. Consumption is going down dramatically. They were anywhere from 35 weeks, and we're getting close to only 10 hours per week. Obviously, we know this is due to the fact that over the past 5 years, 8 million U.S. households have abandoned traditional pay TV. Consumers are now convenience-driven and therefore device agnostic. That's a little term we like to use these days. People don't matter, it doesn't matter what screen they're watching as long as it's got the content that they're looking for in the moment. But yet, in spite of all of this, broadcast television still reigns king for news choices for consumers. No other medium even comes close. And I'm sorry that the projector is blocking this, but the same goes for traffic, weather, and news. No one even comes close. So let's go to that gentleman in the video that said broadcast television is dead. We know that could not be farther from the truth. So I wanted to pull some numbers from Nielsen this year alone with broadcast viewership across the country. Be interested to see if you can take a guess with this. So 15.3 million viewers across the country. This is adults 18 to 49. Any idea what that could have been? No guesses? Anybody? NBC people? All right. Finale of This Is Us. That's how many people tuned in for that show alone. Something happened pretty recently that had 19.5 million viewers across the country. Still no guesses? Come on, Gina, what is it? That's exactly right. It was Comey's testimony just a few weeks ago. And lastly, 30.6 million, and I did not go cheap on you and pick the Super Bowl. So what could this be? Lovely inauguration. Now Garrett is going to give us some broadcast radio numbers.
Just like Lauren, we took it to the streets as well, and we asked the question, do you listen to local broadcast radio? Why or why not?
I usually listen to XM radio because I can choose my music anytime I want, and I enjoy that.
I used to listen to local broadcast radio, but I got Sirius Radio about a year and a half ago.
I don't because I am usually listening to XM radio just so I can listen to music.
I'm not that crazy about the kind of music that's out there now.
I do not listen to local radio. I listen to Sirius XM.
Yes, I do listen to local radio. You get very pertinent news.
Local radio, I do. I listen to my car, XM radio, or FM, or...
Things to make listeners sound like they said something dirty, but actually don't. Radio by the numbers. This is not big news. Number one reach medium in the U.S. terrestrial radio. 93% of the population. That's a record 268 million people tune into radio each week on various platforms. Edison Research did a study, the share of the ear, where if you talk to advertisers, they think AM/FM radio and Spotify and Pandora are very similar. The reality, quite the opposite. AM/FM radio, 54%. And then NAB President Gordon Smith said that TV and radio need to be on as many platforms as possible to guarantee consumers have access to it. We as broadcasters, we need to adapt. How many have Alexa? Many people have Alexa? Well, I will say that these things are transforming the way we listen to radio. And it's bringing speakers back into the home. 35 million units already in homes and offices. And by 2020, research firm Gartner expects 3/4 of American homes are going to have a voice-activated speaker. So if your stations are not embracing Alexa, they need to be. So how are we growing when there are so many different options? Well, we're expanding in social media and growing with advances in technology. And how is radio re-engaging a wandering audience? Well, we're staying true to what we do and what we know. We're remaining live, we're remaining local, and we're engaging with our audiences. Consumers want that local connection.
How can we deliver content that will not only retain our audience, but also connect with them? Are we putting the story first or the character? The cultivation of unique storytelling evokes emotion and leaves a memorable mark. John Goodwin from 13 News Now in Norfolk has an idea to re-engage wanderers and enhance community outreach.
Good morning, everybody. This was hard for me. This is a hard topic because I'm a news guy, not a sales or marketing guy. So what I want to talk about is kind of an outstanding opportunity we have to implement some really cool storytelling. NPR or our public radio stations are really well known for the theater of the mind, being able to really paint a picture in your ears, right? And you can visualize what's going on just based on the sound. Well, we have an opportunity to do the same exact thing with very compelling, character-driven storytelling and television. So I just want to talk about our content real quick. And the first key to the content is we have this vehicle, and we're tempted to want to not make it about us as a station or an organization, but we need to start making the character drive, right? Drive the vehicle. We give up the keys, and it's the character's job to tell the story, because it's their story after all, right? You want to give your audience an emotional connection. So once you introduce this character in your story, you will probably fall in love with the person, and I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine in just a moment that hopefully you connect with the character. And by letting the character drive, focusing on a person instead of an event, it gives less emphasis to an event. It doesn't say the event is obsolete or it doesn't matter, but are you really going to connect to a house fire, or are you going to connect to the family that was affected? So I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. Let's meet Chuck.
For some people, a sense of humor is important.
Never could dance, but now I'm a lot worse.
These days, for Chuck Turner, a sense of humor is everything.
Getting old's not for sissies, so you gotta keep moving.
After 33 years working for the ATF, Chuck is now retired. And like most retired people, life has slowed down. At first, he spent many of his days right here in this recliner.
I seemed to be very tired. I wanted to sleep a lot, and I just pretty much stayed in the chair watching TV.
But now he's trying to be more active.
So where the heck is the story, right? There's no story. But you've met Chuck. Hopefully, are you starting to fall in love with him a little bit? You know, he seems like a lovable guy, right? That's the character in the story, obviously. So I kind of want to take you through real quick. Man, I wish I had more time, but real quick, from what I want to call, we'll take you from a handshake to a hug. So we just shook hands with Chuck, right? And hopefully by the end of the story, you're going to want to emotionally give him a big old bear hug just from getting to know him.
He's trying to be more active. Chuck heads to the gym about 3 times a week to take a boxing class.
I'm going to go around this way because that truck's there.
He even picks up a friend along the way.
There he is, waiting on me.
And when the two get to the Princess Anne YMCA, it's time to put the gloves on.
How is everybody? Happy Monday?
Happy Monday.
Get your arms moving.
Wendy Wilkerson teaches the hour-long class.
Hook, hook, forward. 1, 2, 3. Punch, punch.
For Chuck, the boxing is a way to keep his body and mind sharp. Because in the last few years,
woo, Chuck!
Life has taken a few jabs at his health.
The story's starting to become a little more clear now, right? There's a conflict now. What's going on? So the life is starting to take some jabs at his health. Now, I know that this is not a foreign concept to many of you. This storytelling has been around. It's certainly part of the present of the news industry today in our country, but it's most definitely the future. We're about to hug Chuck. We're about to hug it out with Chuck. And we're not going to watch the rest of the story, but I hope that by now, is anyone emotionally connected to Chuck? Are you falling in love with Chuck at all? I mean, he's a compelling guy, right? And so that's the key, is you got to get out of the way and let Chuck tell the story. And he literally drove us to the gym. So you let the character drive, give him the keys. So let's hug it out.
Life has taken a few jabs at his health.
He got Parkinson's probably about back in 10 years ago.
That Parkinson's diagnosis came right after a liver transplant.
I didn't really want to do anything. I was depressed.
No advancing, just hit the dots. Give me some depth. It's a progressive disorder, so exercise helps to either keep it from progressing or keep it at bay. Punch!
The twisting exercise that comes with boxing focuses on balance and hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, punch it up!
Which helps with Parkinson's symptoms.
Was there any power behind this?
Yeah, oh my goodness.
And even in class, Chuck keeps the laughter going.
He's the jokester of the class.
I'm ready for a nap after this.
He likes to come around and tell jokes and pretend that he's in the witness protection program. You been practicing or what?
No.
Yeah, right.
I named my machine.
3, 4, 6, 11.
And my machine's named after one of my wife's old boyfriends.
But all jokes aside, Chuck knows exactly where he would be without the Rocksteady boxing class.
I would probably
Let's be loud.
be worse.
Switch!
Not moving around, probably depressed. I'm glad to be there, and I look forward to seeing my fellow Parkies.
His fellow Parkies, that's what they call themselves.
So you get the idea. Much like sales and marketing, you guys have to build that rapport and build those relationships with your clients. This is a way that news can build a relationship through the screen. I'll say in a second how it'll encourage a dialogue, but this is how news can really connect with the audience in a special way. The cycle. First you have the content. We have Chuck, the emotional connection with Chuck, right? Which lends itself to an investment in our community. We care about the people in our community, not necessarily the events. The YMCA is not bad, but let's not make it about the boxing class at the YMCA, right? Which will lend itself to more content. So the thing I want to leave you guys with, and hopefully you got it from the story, is an event is never more interesting than a person. So just be thinking about even the people in your lives. You may be in news, maybe in radio, or pardon me, TV, maybe in radio, but when it comes to news, I'm always looking for, what's your story? What's this person's story? What's compelling about this person? Because everyone's got a story. You think you're not interesting, I beg to differ. So, thank you.
Whether you're in television or radio, new media habits show trends that broadcasters must recognize and adapt to in order to keep up with our ever-changing audiences. We as local broadcasters now have the ability to follow our audiences when they decide to increase their media consumption through streaming content and participate in cord cutting. We can adapt by using new media habits as a topic of conversation within our programming decisions, as well as another source of advertising revenue. all the while still providing our local communities and audiences with connections that are invaluable. Olivia Tavares from iHeartMedia in Richmond is here to tell us more.
All right, so it's important for us to understand not only how our audience consumes media, but also why they do it in different ways. First off, I'm going to start with two different kind of categories that people will listen or view. Local radio and TV is more of a join the world type of connection. They're looking for a social consumption. They want that local content, whether it's news, sports, traffic. You can see this through the local TV app and even online viewing, broadcast radio, and they also discover new music this way. Whereas on the other hand, music and video collection is more of an escape the world. They're not really looking to get that local connection that they might need at other times. This is more of a utilitarian consumption. This includes the playlists, podcasts, custom radio stations that they may have formed, binge watching, and the cord cutters or even the cord nevers. So going back to local radio and TV, 9 out of 10 consumers say that they listen to both live radio or watch live television, but at different times for different reasons. And television itself, with adults 18 plus, are watching more than any other of the audio or video consumption. With music and video collection, though, 70% of adults 18 to 44 still say that they discover new music through the radio. Then they go and download it for their music collection. And according to Tony Haro, the VP of Audience Insights at Nielsen, streaming audio is more of a replacement for CD collections than your local radio station. So what are the trends that we need to follow? Traditional television and local radio are still preferred, despite all of the other options for media consumption. With TV in particular, you can see here the share of the TV set-top box is at 55%, which is the highest share there. And in regards to radio, only about 10% of all listening is the digital, so that makes up all of the streaming apps like Pandora and Spotify. So risk for decreased viewership is still a concern. With eMarketer, they estimate about 62% of the world's internet users will view digital video in 2016, which is up from 2017, which was up from 60% in 2016. And as Garrett said before, devices that are in-home speakers like the Google Home or Amazon Echo are opening new doors for radio specifically. People might be able to call in to an advertiser on demand, enter into radio contests, or even call to request songs. And lastly, the threats and solutions. So with TV specifically, we've got cord cutters out there. And some companies have come up with skinny bundles. They're offering fewer channels at a lower price. But consumers, again, they still want to see that live content, so they might be doing options like the skinny bundles. Growing digital consumption is a threat to both radio and TV. And with that, we need to go where our listeners go, or our viewers. We need to have an app presence, like iHeartRadio or the NBC 12 app. Ultimately, we need to stay connected with our audience through all platforms. Use your audience as your medium. Broadcasters are a trusted group, and our audience sees us as a credible friend. Here's an example of a solution to this.
This is Jay. Jay has bounced between satellite and cable companies for years. Then he started watching his favorite shows over the internet. Jay cut the cord, kept the modem, and bought a streaming device. Jay's only problem? He was no longer connected to Here. Here, as in the local news and weather he relies on from NBC 12 News. Here wasn't on his device until now. Jay found the new free NBC 12 News app on Roku and Amazon Fire. Now Jay can stay connected to Here. And no one knows Here better than NBC 12 News.
In a time of dynamic change, we must work harder than ever before to stay local, relevant, and connected with our audience. One of the most important ways we can do this is by delivering rich, meaningful stories in order to produce impactful, trustworthy newscasts that truly matter to our viewers. In the era of Facebook and the idea of fake news, Sasha Percival of WHSV-TV in Harrisonburg is here to discuss some noteworthy findings on how to keep our newscasts on solid footing and help our viewers parse fact from fiction.
So when it comes to fake news, it all starts with trust. In a September 2016 Gallup poll, respondents were asked about their level of trust in mass media. And of those who responded, they were asked the question, do you have a fair amount or a great amount of trust in mass media? 68% don't. That's right, only 32% have a functional level of trust in mass media. And if you're wondering, that is at an all-time low since they began asking the question in 1972. Lolly Daskell of Lead From Within writes, we are trusted because of our way of being, not because of our polished exteriors or our expertly crafted communications. And that leads us to Facebook. As it turns out, birds of a feather like together. And the more you like and share content, the more of the same things that are going to show up in your newsfeed and the more Facebook is going to send you. And that works great for many topics, except when it comes to news. Because the more that you like and share false news articles, knowingly or not, the more of the same that show up in your newsfeed and the more likely you are to believe them. There's actually a name for that. It's called confirmation bias, and it perpetuates the views that agree with our own, correct or not. Part of the challenge that we face is in the way that people choose to receive their news. So if we consider for a second a quote that Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, posted on his own page the night after the November presidential election, he writes, I'm confident we can find ways for our community to tell us what content is most meaningful, but I believe we must be extremely cautious about becoming arbiters of truth ourselves. So that's a priority of Facebook. Consider alternatively the requirements of local broadcasters. From FCC.gov, the FCC has stated that rigging or slanting the news is a most heinous act against the public interest. The Commission will investigate a station for news distortion if it receives documented evidence of such rigging or slanting. So basically, tech companies don't feel the same journalistic weight in dissemination of the news as we do as journalists. And so that can present a challenge. So how do we start to address that? It goes back to the trust that I mentioned a minute ago. If you recall Lolly Daskell's quote about it's not about our polished exteriors or expertly crafted communications, that starts to get at the heart of it. We need to reflect the diversity of our audience. Unbiased news is not only for the societally advantaged, it's for everyone. And we need to reflect that in our newscasts. And when we address our markets, we should look like them, we should sound like them, we should reflect their points of view. So the more that we can make those connections, the more that we can establish trust. There's another piece to this puzzle, and that is to keep it simple. Fake news is generally delivered with a very simple formula. It's powerful phrasing to an interested audience in a very simple, consumable format. To debunk it, we need to do the same. We need to deliver it in an equally consumable format. In combating fake news, objectivity is something that we as journalists have always used as a standard practice. However, a lot of our audience may not know that, or they may not even understand why that's important. So to start, we need to begin taking credit for the things that we're already doing. Things like presenting stories from more than one source or angle, digging deeper than the press release, avoiding the talking head. So don't just get the official, get people on the street who are impacted by that. Dig deeper into the story. And finally, we need to present a compelling case to our audiences as to why it matters. Rounding out to my final points about how to combat fake news, the first is this. It's about connection. It's about our people. That's what it boils down to, because it's going to be our people that are out there fighting the battle for the hearts and minds of our viewers and listeners. Brene Brown defines connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. So broadcasters have a giant reach in their markets. We need to start using that to educate our viewers, just as I mentioned a moment ago in the objectivity slide. We need to connect more on social media. Part of what I read was that people don't trust big organizations, they trust those who share. Well, we can share. We're on Facebook and on social media all the time. So the more we share, the more we deepen those interactions. And finally, we need to reflect the diverse stories and points of view of our markets, because the more that we do that, the more that our markets feel heard and the more connection we have. Combating fake news isn't rocket science. It's about smart, relatable newscasts. It's about authentic connections. And it's a little bit about education, which brings me to my final point. We need to go back to school. We need to get the classrooms into our stations and the stations into our classrooms. The more we get our meteorologists and journalists and station personnel into those classrooms, the more connections that we can make, the more educational and positive PR opportunities that we can put out there. The more we get those classrooms into our stations, we're a family-friendly environment. It's a great opportunity for education. And we may just get the opportunity to speak to that female family decision maker who may be getting her news on Facebook right now. We need to host student athletic banquets and scholarship events and other community connecting activities. The more we do that, the more we make our audiences feel heard and valued, and the better the connections are. And finally, my recommendation is that we create partnerships with our local colleges and universities and even high schools. Set up mock newsrooms with those organizations. Help students understand what it takes to vet out a news story so that they know how to spot what's real and what's fake. It's a great educational opportunity, and it even helps us for future recruitment opportunities. In sum, fake news is a great challenge for us, but with all great challenges, there's great opportunity. And taking this challenge on in the right way affords us the opportunity to have enhanced relationships, deepen community connections, and an even better product.
Well, thank you all so much for taking the time to be engaged with us this morning and hear all of our recommendations. So our riff on best practices are our Kafepis to success. So we'll end with that. First off, we have to evolve with the times and technology. We can't be resistant to change. We have to be ready to adopt new distribution platforms and follow our people wherever the future leads them.
We also need to recognize revenue platforms, streaming platforms, and smart technologies such as Alexa.
Don't forget the younger generation. Cater your content to millennials. They're the future of our industry.
We need to connect with our audiences, encourage a dialogue, understand how they use social media platforms, and take advantage of that.
And finally, we need to embrace our strengths, remain live, local, hyper-focused, and engaging.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
To take any questions, if you have them for us. Of course.
Of course, Bob does.
I'll grab that one. And part of the challenge, as some of you may know, is not a lack of desire, it's staffing. How do we staff up those news operations to provide those sorts of opportunities and that sort of in-depth journalism style? What I think it goes back to what I spoke about with regard to fake news at the beginning. I think the best service that we can provide right now is to show what we are doing to provide a real news story, a real journalistically vetted news story, and not a slanted opinion that takes somebody down a hole that they don't intend to go in. So for me, I think that is our first step. Looking at creating something that goes even deeper, as you're asking for, that's a challenge that I think that we need to look at as television stations. I don't know that all of us are adequately staffed to do that immediately today, but as we take an eye to the next year, that could be something that we would want to consider more deeply.
Anyone else? All right.
Thank you.